listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. This is episode 86, where we go over some of the current events going on in the firearms world, including a Supreme Court case being heard right now. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 86 of Range Minded, the current events of December 2019. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and as always, I am joined by
Steve Zimmerman. What's up?
How are you,
Shooters?
Sir?
I'm doing good.
Good.
You had a head. You paused, like you didn't remember where we broadcast from.
Oh, it just took me a minute. Because we had our we didn't have a week off. We just did a re-release last week. So
yeah, it was just so crazy with stuff going on that
sure
it just made the most sense.
Well, even we tried to take a break and celebrate the holidays. So
yeah, we try.
Yeah,
but every day is a holiday when you play with guns.
Every day is a great day, so you can't complain. Yeah, right. Your Thanksgiving was good. We were just talking about our Thanksgivings.
Yeah, it was good. Like I was saying off air, all I like is pie anymore. Pumpkin pie and a whole lot of whipped cream.
So yeah, and I was talking about carbo loading on potatoes and mac and cheese and bread and
I've never
stuffing.
You say you have mac and cheese for Thanksgiving? Like
we have the last couple of years. It's not been like a family staple. It's been kind of a new addition.
That's interesting. I love homemade macaroni and cheese.
Oh yeah, we do a 3 cheese. It's quite good.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, actually.
Yeah. So, are you a big turkey guy then, or no?
No, I don't like oven turkey. If it's smoked or if it's like deep fried turkey is really good too. I don't know if you ever had that.
I have. It's delicious.
But I don't know what it is about just oven cooked turkey. I just don't like it. So
really?
My side of the family, my wife's side of the family, they catered to my complaining, and we always have ham to go along with it. So.
Oh, they do both.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I've had deep fried turkey. I've had grilled turkey. We had a Friendsgiving here, and they did. They brought a turkey breast that they did in the oven with honey maple glaze. That was pretty good.
Oh, that was probably good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually enjoyed it quite well. So yeah, it was a good Thanksgiving.
It might be the whole bird that I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I'm sure like if I cooked a turkey breast just right, I'd probably eat it.
Sure. Well, and some people just aren't turkey people. You know, you either like it or you don't. So
yeah, I'm just weird, I guess.
Did you take advantage of any Black Friday sales?
I wasn't going to.
Well, that's not what I asked.
We ended up going into Idaho Falls.
Okay.
But it was like later in the afternoon. We didn't go in the morning. It was.
Oh, you didn't do like the 5 a.m. deal?
No, I don't play that game.
You don't play that game?
No, we had to go into town anyways. Look. And we just decided to go into town a little bit later or go to the mall and some other stuff. My kids wanted to go to the bookstore, and I ended up finding some stuff.
Find anything gun related or other related?
No, I've been put on quarantine from buying guns for a while.
Wow, that was a long time coming.
I know. Actually, it was more self-imposed than anything. So
really,
I have to slow down. I got to slow down a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So no, I've been there. I think
that'll last for a very short amount of time, I'm sure.
Maybe till after Christmas.
I seem to find deals. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't get anything gun related on Black Friday. I don't think I actually bought anything on Black Friday. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's hard because like over here in Idaho Falls, like I don't really like going to gun stores because I just shop at Independence all the time. So
right, you got spoiled.
Most of the time it's not even worth it financially. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
It's just not worth financially because I get a better deal. So,
Yeah, that helps.
That
helps. But well, speaking of Black Friday, we're going to do a current events episode today, and because there's a lot going on. But this is a perfect segue into Black Friday in the gun world because it was the second highest record of background checks ever on Black Friday. A one day.
Wasn't it
Black Friday second highest record?
Yeah, they said that we could arm the Marine Corps again with the AR sold or something.
Pretty close. It was over 200,000 background checks on Black Friday alone.
Nice.
And
and it's weird though. That doesn't seem like that many though. Does
200,000.
that seem weird? I would have thought there would have been more.
Well, it's only on one
That's
day.
Still a
though.
lot. That's true.
Well, let me put it into perspective for you, because the highest ever was 2017's Black Friday, which was like closer to 300,000. But the highest month this year was in March, and that was 2.6 million. So if you think about it, you break down 2.6
in a month though.
In a month, and so but imagine 10% of those background checks happening on one day. Out of the 25 days, let's say you count 6 days a week times 4 is 24, 25 days.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And honestly, like, I am surprised because I have talked with the people at the NICS or whatever.
Yeah, NICS.
Yeah, NICS. And I'm surprised that system ran, and maybe it didn't. Like, if they were able to go through that many, because they really don't have that many people running in NICS. Like, they're a subcontracted unit that works for the FBI. But
oh, really?
Like that surprises me that they were able to keep up with that.
Well, I mean,
I'm not gonna lie.
Maybe with the waiting periods in a lot of different places, it kind of balances out.
The e-check thing speeds it up too, and I honestly don't know why they don't just go directly to electronic. But really what happens right now, and I think we've talked about this before, even if you file or if you go to the dealer and you fill out all the stuff electronically, there still has to be physical eyes that go through that information. It doesn't just go through a computer on the other side. It just basically comes to them in an electronic version, and they still review it physically. So, like I said, it's pretty interesting.
Really? So even if I, as a concealed carry permit holder, would go into Independence, buy a gun, fill out my information, and send it off, and
not as a concealed carry holder, because you don't have to go through NICS because you've already gone the background check. But if you just go in off the street without a permit, even though it gets submitted electronically, they still have eyes just making sure stuff's filled out.
So
and putting it into the system.
Really? So even if I were just a normal everyday person without a concealed carry permit, went and filled out a 4473 and submitted it electronically, it would still see human eyes.
Yep.
Interesting. And they did 200,000 of those in a day.
That is fantastic.
So I just wonder if some of that was with like...
Good on America.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, maybe it does work.
Good on America. And it makes me kind of wonder too, like, and we'll talk about some of the stuff later on, because it seems like there's some gun stuff coming down the pipeline on a state level in a few different states. So I wonder if it's out of fear. Unfortunately, the gun industry is really steered by a lot of fear, especially when it comes to politics. So I wonder if that's what it has to do with.
It could be, but it seems like it's just the gun industry and the gun community is getting stronger every day. Like there's more and more people getting into shooting, and there's more and more guns, in the U.S. and things of that sort. So I don't know.
And maybe we're responsible for a couple of those people. Who knows?
Could be. I hope so.
Me too.
Being good stewards of the Second Amendment and inspired people to get into shooting.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting tidbit about Black Friday. Is that, if you're into the gun world at all, I mean, obviously you're gonna get 6 million emails from everywhere about Black Friday sales, and usually they're pretty good ones. Like we had some great ones at Independence.
Yeah, there were some good ones at the store. Some of the stuff maybe I should have taken advantage of, because honestly, there were some deals that were better than employee pricing.
Yeah, better than our deals,
but still, yeah. But that's okay. Share the love.
Yeah, that's all right. It'll always come around next year. Black Friday. So there's one thing you can count on is that Black Friday happens every year.
That's right. It's like my birthday and Christmas. They all come around once a year.
All happens every year. So, but speaking about the number of guns in the U.S., we both happened upon, I think, the same article. And since I went first, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Well, I saw a teaser on this. I think it was on Facebook today. So I went straight to the source of the article, which is the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And if you guys out there don't know for sure what the NSSF is,
There we go.
if I can say that out, it's they're basically a trade association that most ranges are going to be a part of. Almost all the manufacturers are part of. They're the ones that put on SHOT Show every year, so it's a huge. Just a huge association, and they're the head of it all.
And a great organization.
Anyway, they are fantastic. They do a lot of stuff, way more than what people even understand. But that's besides the point. So they've decided to compile some information that they got from the ATF over the last few years. Actually, the report really goes from about 1986 up to 2018, so it doesn't even really have some of the 19 numbers in there. But this is we may have talked about the 200,000 background checks that were made, but just the number of firearms that are in civilian possession, as they put it, between 1986 and 2008 is 422, almost 423 million guns.
That's a lot of guns.
That is such great news to me. Yeah, that is fantastic. It's like almost 2 guns per citizen of the United States.
Yeah, 1.2 guns for every person in the country.
That is fantastic.
And
that's a lot of firearms.
That's a lot of. I can't even it's like where it's like somebody tries to get you to picture $1 million. I can't even picture 4.5, over 4 million guns.
Well, even 100,000 to 200,000 guns, like the background check. Like, our store doesn't have 200,000 guns inside of it.
No, I think we've got under 1,000, right?
No, there's probably
maybe.
I bet there's about 2. There might be 2,000 guns total.
Really?
Maybe, but there probably is less than that in reality.
Sure.
But there's quite a few.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, but
part of the.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, 400 million. I was going to say another part of the report that actually does include some of the 2019 numbers.
Yeah. Is
MSRs or ARs, whatever you want to call them, modern sporting rifles.
Right.
And here's what I think is funny, because there's some of the people running for president on the Democrat side. Well, we'll just come take your guns. No, I don't think you have the capability of it, because just ARs. And there's no way this number. I think this number is actually quite low.
I agree.
What is really out there? But they figure 17,740,000 ARs in private ownership.
Yeah, so that's almost 18 million. I'm sorry. Million.
And I would be willing to bet that there's probably another, maybe even 1 million in there that they have no idea about.
Yeah, I was going to round it up to 20 and say, because between 80% lowers and maybe even 3D printed lowers or anything like that, I mean, there's no record of that. You don't have to pass a background check to do that. Or
well, and in reality too, if you own a machine and you have the understanding to do it and you're not selling them, you could be building your own rifles.
You could,
as long as you're not selling them. So that number is probably low.
Yeah, I mean, I would put money on it, saying it'd be closer to 20 million.
Yeah, and you're probably right.
Yeah, because that includes ARs and AKs, any kind of modern, modern sporting rifle.
Yeah, and over half of them in 2017, over half the guns sold, 54%. Were ARs in 2017,
which is interesting, because when I was reading the same article, I think, well, where did you get your article from?
Straight from the NSSF. I went straight to their website.
That's right. You said that. And so I got mine from the Washington Examiner. So it's a little more interesting, because they say, despite years of criticism of modern assault-style rifles such as the AR-15 and AK-47, there are a record 17.7 million in private hands, proving that it is the most popular gun around. Which, if we go to, was it common use, I believe?
Yeah, from DC versus Heller.
Yeah, in that court case, they talked about common use, about you can't necessarily regulate what's a firearm type that's in common use. If that's the most those kinds of rifles are the most popular in the country, how are you going to argue that that's not common use?
That seems to be very common, right?
I mean, it's the most common kind in the country.
And I have an idea. I'm going to look up something real quick. So let's see. I'm going to look up how many Ford pickups.
Oh boy. Guaranteed not 7. Well, no. I mean, maybe from its inception to now, you could argue maybe 17 million. I don't know. That's a great question.
And I'm just going to say in 2018.
Oof, that'd be a great question.
Okay. So all F-Series Ford pickups in 2018. So what was how many ARs were sold in 2017? What did I tell you?
Over 50%.
Yeah, 54%. Well, yeah, I guess it really doesn't give us
quite a bit
in that particular article. But in 2018, the amount of F-Series pickups, so that's 150 to 650s, that is 900,000. So there was probably more ARs sold in 2018 than Ford pickups purchased.
That's impressive.
And I picked Ford because they have been one of the most popular vehicles in the world.
Yeah, the number one selling truck. I mean, you can see the commercials. Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
Yeah, and the president of the NSSF came out and said this too: is that it shows the industry that America has a strong desire to continue to purchase firearms for lawful purposes, and that the modern sporting rifle continues to be the most popular centerfire rifle sold in America today, and is clearly a commonly owned firearm.
Amen to that.
How about that? So another fun fact from this one is last year, do you know how many rounds of ammunition were produced by the industry?
Oh, I do, but we should tell everybody else.
Tell me, right? You tell me.
An estimated 8.1 billion with a B.
Yeah, that's right, Dr. Evil. 8.1 billion.
And I don't know if on your side of the article, if they cited this, but just in the ammunition manufacturing side, there are over 12,000 employees.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's they had it at the bottom here. Yeah, firearms ammo manufacturing accounted for nearly 12,000 employees, producing more than $4.1 billion in goods shipped in 2017. That's a hefty industry.
Yeah. And some of those companies are in Idaho, which is even better.
Yeah, I mean, you have I think ARM is up in Horseshoe Bend, right?
Mm-hmm. And then you have
Freedom,
Idaho Ordnance, Freedom Munitions.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're forgetting the big one up in Lewiston, CCI.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Good place to be for firearms.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing to me.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the amount. Oh, here's another number in there. So 2017, nearly 8 million firearms were produced. Of those, 4.4 million were handguns and revolvers, 2.8 were rifles, and 600,000 were shotguns.
Yeah, and it's about the same in 2018, believe it or not.
Yeah, pretty close. Almost. Yeah, really close.
Yeah, there were more in 2017, but yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, that's just, it's like I said, it's a number that I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's a lot of guns. I mean, how many of those did you buy? You're probably account for what, 1 million of those?
If you ask my wife, yeah, it probably seems pretty close to that.
She got a few, so you can picture it, no problem.
Yeah, just buy another safe. It's all good. One of
the funny things too is there's a quote from a guy who owns or is a marketing director for a gun store in North Carolina. And he goes, "We also saw a spike in sales of tactical rifles like ARs and AKs, of which I think we can confidently thank Beto O'Rourke."
Awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of funny where you said you're going to take him and then it has a big backfires like that.
Well, we always joked that Obama was the best rifle salesman or gun salesman back in the day, during his administration. And it was the truth. And that's the other thing is so many of these politicians don't see the need for the Second Amendment, including Bloomberg. He came out with some pretty amazing comments the last few days. But
because he's running for president now, I think, right?
Yeah, but he is. But but it's comments that they make that really drive the sales even higher, which I don't know, it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about that before where like, Obama didn't really pass any sort of gun control legislation or whatever.
Yeah, no, he didn't. And like I said, we have talked about this before. He was actually less restrictive than our current administration. But it sure seemed like it was more infringed on, which is strange.
Yeah. Well, and that just goes to show, like we've talked about, is that gun rights, and enjoying the shooting sports don't know party lines or color or creed or race or, gender or age or anything. It's, everybody's kind of, I don't know. Everybody's kind of either for it or against it, and it doesn't necessarily matter what political party or walk of life you come from. The gun community has a lot of different people included in it.
Yeah. And that's good. It needs to be diverse. It is probably the most diverse industry of any in the United States.
It does. And I think it's one of those, hobbies, industries, kind of shooting the sports kind of aspect of it, the competition that you can look and see a slice of life from every kind of person, city, rural, whatever, however you want to slice it. And I think a lot of other hobbies and subcultures and stuff would be jealous to have the kind of diversity that we do,
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot of guns out there and it's only getting stronger. If people didn't really like guns or were really against them, the numbers would show it. Nobody would be buying them,
Yeah.
And the other thing, and that kind of leads to my theory that there's maybe a vocal minority against it and maybe a vocal minority that's for it. But I think there's a silent majority in the middle who's for it, but doesn't necessarily talk about it.
I think that's probably pretty accurate. Because and I think they're on both sides of the aisle, like you're saying.
Oh, sure. I agree.
So I think that it's, they just close their mouth because they don't want to deal with the adverse side effects to their party.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not easy to do. You know what I mean? Like I've talked about before, coming from an anti-gun state and a place in the country where guns are, not talked about. And if they are talked about, they're talked about in the news, in crime and whatever. And, learning how to be open and about guns was a new thing for me. And I think that's for a lot of people,
And we've talked about that journey before, and it can be difficult, especially in family situations. Like, they say we just came through or going through the holidays, and they say, well, don't talk about certain things during holiday dinner.
Yeah.
And it's too bad because I don't really understand why it's so polarizing, because it seems so benign, and it should be more unifying to go out and just go shooting with the family.
Yeah, but like we've talked about before, it's a lot of people's, I think most of their exposure and stuff is to the media and to mass shootings, which, obviously are, supremely unfortunate, but are not, the majority of gun crime and gun deaths, It's just the most, exposed part.
Yeah. And it's most visual. Yeah. It is pretty sad and disappointing that it has to be that way. And
that's scary. And we've talked about it too. It's scary for people to see, you know what I mean? Nobody wants to see that happen. And, it makes you, it's unfortunate to see, on TV and everything, but it's not, it's a very small, portion of how, really of what actually is happening.
Well, and gun crime, despite what a lot of people say, has dropped dramatically in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Almost 50%. So, I mean, it's getting safer. We see that more and more firearms are being purchased. If the rhetoric was correct, then there should be a huge, a huge uptick in gun crime, seeing how many firearms are sold. But it doesn't exist. It's still going down. It's interesting.
Yeah. And we've talked about, the CDC, the actual use of guns as defensive tools, and the CDC having that research done, and I think I talked about it a couple episodes ago about our friend Daniel, who we took shooting for the first time ever. And he asked me, he goes, how many, whenever you're watching the news, you hear about all these bad things happening or whatever, but you never hear about defensive gun use or whatever. And he goes, why is that? Do people actually use guns in self-defense? And I go, well, boy, let me tell you what.
How long do you have?
Yeah. So, and he was very surprised, and he actually was inspired to look into it a little bit more. So, it just, I think people don't know that these things exist, and these numbers exist, and these things actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And we could beat a dead horse. I mean, cell phone use has a way higher mortality rate than gun crime does, which it's crazy. Hands and fists. More people die from hands and fists than any rifle, not just an AR-15.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about it too, and a lot of other gun supporters will say that the majority of gun violence is suicide, which is unfortunate, and it's a terrible tragedy, but a lot of it too is gang violence, in inner cities and a lot of, poverty stricken areas as a result of poverty. And I think that's a lot of stuff people don't want to talk about. No.
And if any of the listeners are interested in some real homework, they could look up some of those, because you can get on the FBI statistics and look at all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can go by city. And so if you take out the gang violence that happens in Chicago and Detroit and Baltimore, which is it's skyrocketed in the last few years in Baltimore.
Which is
New Orleans. If you go through any of those and you realize, hey, most of these are gang violence, and you remove just those cities, if you just took out Detroit and LA,
the major cities,
the per capita violent gun use, we're better than the majority of the world. And it's just silly, but they don't want to look at it that way.
It's crazy, man. So, but
what do you do?
Moving along to some other things, we'll talk about some legislation and some judicial things going on. Don't know if this is actually going to happen or not, but you said legislature, all that kind of stuff. So a MD who's also a congressman actually introduced the Home Defense and Competitive Shooting Act. Have you heard about this?
I don't know if I had. There's a lot of stuff going through. Maybe if I hear more about it, it might ring a bell.
So this is from a press release from the actual congressman's website. Is Dr. Roger Marshall, U.S. congressman from Kansas, of all places, which I didn't even know there were people in Kansas. So actually, wait, our friend Todd, right? He's from Kansas.
Which one? Oh yeah, the Jayhawks fan, right?
Yeah, I always got him confused with Kentucky. So yeah, it was Todd from Kansas, who I think is now in the Treasure Valley, believe it or not.
Hi, Todd.
Yeah, how's it going, man? Hope you're enjoying yourself in Gem State.
Heck yeah, he better be.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Congressman Roger Marshall introduced the Home Defense and Competitive Shooting Act, which would streamline bureaucratic regulations, reduce lengthy ATF processing times, and remove unconstitutional fingerprint requirements and fees for certain rifles, which, if I have read this correctly, it's about SBRs and how basically you wouldn't have to register an SBR with the ATF, or it would be a more standardized thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've talked about this before. I think, first of all, I think that bill's fantastic. Second of all, I'm disappointed that we have to have somebody submit a bill to the legislature that has to grant us the rights that we already have. But with the way AR pistols are right now, why would anybody do a form 1, right?
Right. There's no reason to, especially because you can bring an AR pistol across state lines. But if you were going to do that with an SBR, you have to notify we've talked about this. I think every county sheriff or every law enforcement official.
Any ATF regulated, any regulated firearm like that, whether it be a suppressor, SBR, or whatever, you have to inform the sheriffs of each one of those counties, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So it'd be fantastic if that got repealed. I think that it'll take more than just a bill of that small of a bill to make it happen, but that would be great.
Well, it's nice to know that there are people there trying to, do the right thing and restore the rights because, and if you go back, I believe into the history of, why short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns are on the NFA list was due to concealability because of the gangsters back in the, the 20s and 30s and early 40s or whatever. And nowadays, I mean, maybe you could make the same argument, but it's at the same time. I mean, I wonder how many SBRs are actually registered. I mean, how many SBRs we actually have in the country, you know what I mean? And how many are used in a crime?
I actually know that. Well, no, it was that full auto statistic from an ATF agent we were talking.
That's another good point too. You want to take it a step further where,
well, yeah, the full auto crime was one in the last 35 years.
Right.
Actual registered full auto. I mean, there's some black market stuff out there. So the people that are spending the time and going through all the loopholes, or not loopholes, all the red tape to get their stuff are not committing the crimes.
Right.
But I don't know how many. I'm sure I could find that information. How many SBRs are out there? That would be kind of intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the ATF has it somewhere. But 9 times out of 10, any crimes are committed with non NFA stuff.
Sure. Well, and the whole point of the NFA, anyways, was to get the mobsters on tax evasion. Once they created that and they weren't paying the taxes on it, then they could nab them on that. That was the point. But now everybody else suffers.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Silly.
So, but we'll see if this goes anywhere. I mean, I don't think it would go anywhere. Kind of like how the Hearing Protection Act with the silencers didn't go anywhere. But
what state was he from?
Kansas.
Oh, that's right, Kansas.
Yeah, the 1st District of Kansas, Dr. Roger Marshall, which is interesting. He's an MD. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
It seems like, where was I reading or listening? Something about when the Hearing Protection Act was first introduced. That was the first time that the pro-gun groups had reached out to the medical community. About health and safety reasons, right? That was the first time that any of that had ever really had been talked about, which I think that's why it got so much traction, was the medical community started saying, hey, this does kind of make sense. There's mufflers on cars. Why don't we have mufflers for guns? Like we talked about with Joey.
Yeah. Well, and you've talked about it where it's uncouth in other countries to shoot and to hunt without a silencer. We talked about that in England and other places. It's just it's a thing you can get off the shelf.
Yeah. But here they're way more dangerous in the United States than outside. So
yeah, so we might see it go somewhere. I don't know.
It may get a little bit of traction. Like I say, it's hard to fathom that out of Kansas that something that could happen, but you never know. It really could grab a hold somehow.
Yeah, we'll see. So we'll have to see what happens, but at least there's some legislators, putting these things forward to try to get some gun rights back, where they belong, you know? So we'll see. We'll see. I just thought that was interesting. We always talk about how much bad news there is. Thought maybe some good news would be a good thing. So,
and that kind of reminded me of what's going on in Virginia. Have you been keeping track of anything that going on in the state of Virginia?
I actually haven't heard anything out of Virginia. So you're gonna have to tell me what's going on.
So this is a big deal, and maybe even some of our listeners haven't even been paying attention to or not realize what's going on since the midterm. So. And they had a gubernatorial race recently where the Republicans lost basically control of the state of Virginia.
Okay.
Up to that point, Virginia has been very pro-gun, and they've been, at least in that part of the country, they've been a good sanctuary state, I guess you could say, for the Second Amendment.
Right.
Since then, they have had sweeping gun bills coming through because there has been no resistance to these gun bills. And so it is getting crazy in Virginia.
Really?
They're talking about firearms training and self-defense training on the same level as domestic terrorism. So you'd be getting yes. So isn't that silly? Like
it doesn't make any sense.
When I say sweeping, I mean like sweeping. It is going crazy in Virginia right now.
So that you're basically saying teaching people how to defend themselves is on par with domestic terrorism. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Wow.
It'd be like saying there's, for example, maybe a terror training camp in Dearborn, Michigan, which may or may not be true, but it's the same type of thing. It's on the same level.
Wow.
Is what they're trying to say. So,
all right.
The state went from probably a little bit more red than purple to blue. Like politically speaking, overnight, really.
Wow.
And so now you've got all these citizens that are trying to fight back, and there have been some of the most amazing things happen as far as citizens standing up to the government.
Really?
The point of the Second Amendment is to really fight against a tyrannical government, not to put food on your table.
Right.
That's just a side benefit.
Right.
So in retaliation to the state legislatures, I think it's at 30 counties, maybe 31 counties in Virginia have had like emergency sessions or whatever, and they're becoming Second Amendment sanctuary counties.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've heard a little bit about this now.
Yeah, so now the sheriffs and the police departments will not comply with these laws, and they will not force their citizens to.
Isn't that crazy?
And so you have this huge dichotomy of power, which maybe this is where everything's going to change is in Virginia, because there are vast amounts of people in these open hearings, or in the where the citizens can speak their minds. And there's a bunch of videos coming around, and I'll share some to our Facebook page. They're amazing. Like, these citizens are getting up and sharing their stories, and some of them are extremely well read. And I don't know if some of these people are attorneys or what, but it's amazing what's going on in Virginia. So we have this huge behemoth government saying, nope, we're not letting you exercise your rights anymore. To where the citizens are legitimately saying, we're going to tar and feather our politicians. They're going to have to stay awake at night because we're not letting them rest. This is it. We're done with this.
Isn't that crazy?
And so it's, in a way, it's really scary, because who knows what could happen when you turn up the heat on some of these groups, because we both understand there's some wacko pro-gun groups, like too far right.
Oh, sure.
That I definitely do not support. And maybe that's what they're all about. Maybe they're trying to get these groups to percolate over to where they can enact something else. Who knows? But it's kind of interesting what's going on over there.
Yeah, I had no idea. And it is, if you think about it, it's kind of half a world away, from us, but we're all in it together. So it's interesting to hear about, because like you said, you have the government saying one thing, and then you have, the state government saying one thing, and then you have your local governments. It's like the opposite of preemption. We've talked about, I think, local preemption of state gun laws and things of that sort. And if we haven't, just a quick primer on that is that, like, for example, in Idaho, like, the city or the town, any city and town can't enact their own gun laws that are more restrictive than are from the state.
Correct. Which is great. And honestly, I think Virginia has some of the stuff like that in some of their state constitution.
Sure.
But they're just rewriting the state constitution, or just completely ignoring it, or going through the state Supreme Courts to change it all.
Crazy.
And it is crazy what's going on.
That is, the other thing, it really does unify people together to stand up and fight for their rights, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, when I share some of these videos on the Facebook page, you're going to hear some of the people in the background, and you can tell that hearing is chock-a-block full of supporters. Like, the amount of response that some of these citizens get after they have their 5 minutes is pretty amazing.
Oh, I believe it. And you think about anywhere that's, typically supporting gun rights and then going from that to being against gun
Polar
rights
opposite.
in a matter of days would be, I mean, imagine it happening here. People would be shouting from the rooftops,
And that's one thing I thought about today when I at work, that we hear a lot in Idaho that, I heard it all the time at the gun counter. Oh, that stuff would never happen here. We would never let that happen.
You never know.
I bet those people in Virginia thought the same thing.
Right.
That no, we're the only light of sanity in the East Coast. Well, not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it, like you said, it can happen that fast.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and we even saw that in the Boise City mayoral race, which I know we don't really want to get too deep into politics. The gal that won, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She was at the nation's capital with Moms Demand Action, fighting against, pro gun lobby groups.
Really?
So like Boise City, it could so easily just happen there. Like,
yeah,
it's just a matter of time. It will happen. Honestly, I really do believe it will happen.
It could be, and it's surprising because Boise is such, in the Treasure Valley and all of Idaho, for that matter, is so, outdoors, sportsman's friendly or whatever, and that includes hunting and all that, And it's funny because the first time I ever saw somebody open carrying in Idaho was up.
So was Washington and Oregon and honestly California for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's just interesting because the first time I ever saw anybody open carrying in Idaho was not in Boise. It was up in McCall,
awesome.
which outdoors, kind of thing. And it was at a restaurant. Nobody said anything. Nobody was weirded out about it. And it was a guy was in a snowmobile outfit and he had a pistol on his side. And it was like, okay, like whatever, and if you're outside, if you're snowmobiling, like whatever.
What was your initial thought? Like, oh, I got to keep an eye on this guy.
Not at all.
Like,
I saw him and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like he's got a pistol on his side. It's like, he must be out in the backcountry, maybe there's bears or mountain lions or something out there. Like, and we're out here in McCall, kind of in a more rural area, and was like, okay, whatever.
And gosh, I love McCall. It is so pretty up there.
It is a beautiful place. So, but it's places like those that, I think that make up the most geographic kind of area of Idaho and other open spaces like that. And, but I guess, and you'd think that most people, since it's a big outdoor thing here in Idaho, that most people would be, used to it or okay with it or whatever, but maybe a lot of people don't leave the city. I don't know.
Well, a lot of the demographics changing too. We see that in the Treasure Valley, how much it's changed in the last 3 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
It can change pretty quickly.
Yeah. But that's why I'm thankful that there's a place like Independence, because, you can take new people shooting, or they can discover it on their own and realize that guns can be a part of life that isn't scary at all. Yeah. It's actually an enjoyable part.
And we've seen it in our experiences taking other people shooting.
Yeah.
The joy and the excitement that comes from just spending a few hours behind a gun, or even a few minutes, even if it's 10 rounds behind a 22, how much fun it is. And you can see the countenance change when they do.
Yeah. Talking about first shots and everything. I mean, kind of the same deal, like the first shots class we offer, kind of the same deal where, you have literally your first shots with a handgun, a shotgun, or a 1022. And, you can see what it's all about. And, we've had it firsthand a couple times on our podcast here about people, enjoying the shooting sports. I mean, since, I've had our friend Daniel, again, talking about him, that he's come and talked to me 2, 3, 4 times about wanting to go shooting again and everything. So
yeah,
it's been kind of nice to have somebody say, hey, let's go shooting. Okay. You're not going to tell me twice.
Twist my arm.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one thing that I tried to make happen this after the Friday after Thanksgiving, right?
I guess Black Friday. Sure.
Black Friday. So, my original intent was to, the guy I work for had bought some AR components.
Okay.
He's building a Grendel, a 6.5 Grendel.
Sweet.
And I says, hey, Brad, we're building your gun Friday morning, and then we're going to go shoot it. And he's like, sure, okay. And then he calls me Friday morning. I'm just going to go into the office and Brad.
Going to the office.
Yeah. So instead of shooting and having fun, he went to work.
That's not fun.
Yeah. I don't know if he listens or not. He might actually listen now, and I'll hear about it tomorrow or something. But oh well.
Well, at least he wasn't saying like, I don't want to do this.
No, he really wants to. I just need to be more aggressive and say, hey, dude, put the books down. Let's go.
Yeah. Take a day off for once.
He won't.
Well, so let's, talked about state things, talked about local things. Let's switch gears to the big thing, which prompted this episode in the first place, is that the Supreme Court is working on some things right now. And I'll let you take the lead on this one. I know the basics of it, but I feel like you've done a little bit more research.
So in 2013, the city of New York passed a law that said, basically it said if you own a handgun, regardless of what permit New York State has, or New York City has two different permits. One is to possess a handgun, and one is actually to carry it. So you need permission even to have a gun, basically.
Yeah, which is just like Illinois, where it's like a, it's like a FOID card, basically.
Completely asinine. Well, what the city decided to say was, and they passed this law, was saying, well, if you live in the city of New York, you can no longer take that handgun out of the city of New York. And there's, I think, 7 ranges that are okayed in the city of New York to go and shoot in. And I actually did this was years ago. I talked to a guy that actually ran one of those ranges and basically said it was an old warehouse. It was really dingy and they had terrible ventilation. So pretty sad.
Yeah.
So obviously there was going to be some resistance. So the New York Rifle and Pistol Club or associations, I'm sorry if I screwed that up. I can't remember which one it was for sure. They decided to really cause a stink. So imagine 2013 to 2019, we've had 6 years of back and forth between the pistol associations, the Second Amendment groups, and the city council and the mayor, honestly, of New York City.
Yeah.
So they petitioned the state courts. They petitioned.
There we go.
Nothing happened. Finally, they said, okay, well, we're done. We're taking it to the Supreme Court. And once the city of New York realized that this could be an issue, and we'll talk about how it could be an issue or will be an issue, hopefully, they decided, you know what? Never mind. We'll just throw that
rescinded it.
Yep, we're done. We're not gonna pursue this. Now you might think, oh, that's a win for the Second Amendment, and it kind of is, but
in the short term, but not in the long term.
But what it did is it opened this huge can of worms for the anti-gunners, and maybe this will make sense to some people, maybe it won't. So what this does is, even though the city of New York said, no, we're not going to do this. If and the Supreme Court so obviously said, yeah, we're gonna look at this. They had their first oral arguments. I think it was
Monday.
Monday.
It was Monday, about whether or not the case was moot, which we'll get to again too.
Yeah. So, we'll talk about it a little bit. Yeah, so both sides have their attorneys talking to the Supreme Court. Luckily for us, on our side, or on the pro-gun side, this particular Clement, I think was his last name, he's argued 90 cases in front of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Oh, wow.
Extremely experienced.
Yeah.
And he's very pro-gun. He actually helped with the Heller decision, or the Heller case, and some other stuff that was presented in front of the Supreme Court. So he's very experienced when it comes to Second Amendment arguments.
Yeah, he's got it figured out.
Supreme Court. So what happens is now New York's worried to death that not only will this interfere with their anti-gun legislation within the city of New York, the state of New York, but it could also open up to hearings of any anti-Second Amendment law in the United States.
Right.
This could be,
it sets a big precedent. Huge
precedent. So as long as the Supreme Court says, yes, we're going to hear this, it opens up this huge cavalcade of possible repeals Once because if it goes the way of pro-gun groups, well, then any of those bills can be reintroduced. Not like Heller or anything like that, but magazine bans on state levels.
Any kind of restrictions
on
firearms can be called kind of back into question.
Yes, which would be fantastic. And the real reason why the Rifle Association wanted this to be heard, even though New York said, we promise we won't do anything. I don't think those politicians in the state of New York have that great of a track record with their honesty. And so at any point in time, they could just go right back and say, okay, never mind, we're going to reenact this bill. That's why it's so important that that this bill be heard, or this case be heard in front of the Supreme Court. I read some of the arguments from some of the justices, or some of their questions earlier today, and the Ginsburg and some of their questions. I mean, it's pretty obvious how they perceive how this should go.
Yeah,
but we're hoping with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and maybe even a couple of others, that there'll be some pretty interesting conversations come out of this.
Well, and one of the big thing is, if it's the big thing that they're looking for is whether it's a moot case or not, because the big argument is that it's already been rescinded, and so the plaintiffs have got everything they wanted, and blah 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 blah. But the plaintiffs' argument is that this is an infringement on the Second Amendment as a whole, and so we need to explore this further and get this heard or not. And the fact that the Supreme Court even decided to hear it in the first place rather than just throw it out, I think says a whole lot about where this could go.
And honestly, I think when I read, I'll have to go back and make sure, but it seems like that was Ginsburg's perspective anyway. It was like, why are we even listening to this? You guys, the plaintiffs got everything they wanted. But in reality, mixed in some of this network of legal speak in the state law is, even though they took back that the transportation deal with the firearms, stopping and getting a cup of coffee or going to the bathroom or something at the gas station could put these gun owners in jeopardy still on a legal standpoint. And that's where some of this argument is coming across from the gun lobby group. So this could be huge. Yeah.
And that it comes from a practical standpoint, is that, it's surprising that you could get in trouble that you were, like you said, if you wanted to stop and get a cup of coffee or stop and maybe visit family or something like that, and you're transporting a firearm safely and responsibly, you could be in trouble for that. Like, it's crazy to think about that.
Yeah. And think about this. I mean, this is a constitutional right. If this case was being argued about sexual orientation or something that is technically not constitutionally protected, it would be crazy. There would be so much crap going on about it that everybody would know about it. But where it comes to firearms and opening up our true right to keep and bear arms, there seems to be a problem. I don't get it.
Well, and thankfully, there's been a couple of Supreme Court justices who have said that, like, the Second Amendment seems to be like the forgotten amendment, and that it doesn't get the protection that it deserves and things like that. And, I think it's kind of interesting that, and it's nice to know that there are people like that on the Supreme Court that are, willing to, protect, or at least, give their opinion about what that means to them. I think it's important.
And it is important too, even though this is New York City is obviously has much higher population than the state of Idaho.
Right.
But it's still on the city level. And so I think it's important for us as citizens, even though you might be living in Meridian or Caldwell or Pocatello or McCall or wherever, it's important for us to be active in some way on a city level, to where we know who represents us on the city and the state level, because that's what really influences anything beyond that. So the club, the handgun club, pistol club in New York City, they could have just rolled over and caved and it would have been no big deal, right? Nobody would have heard anything about it.
And just another thing, another thing would have happened.
But their members were vocal on a city level and let their representatives, because even if they didn't vote for them, it's still their representative. Like they're still inside the constituency. So that's what I'm a long way around it is be involved on even a city level, because it's so important to have your voice heard.
Yeah. And you want to know your gun rights, advocacy groups too. That's not really easy to say, but you want to know those groups because those are the people that, are organized and can fight for them, for those rights legally, locally rather. It all starts locally.
And we've talked about the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. I'll support them as long as they're doing the right thing when it comes to our rights.
Right.
I think that's a fabulous organization. Every state has its own group. It would find that group and become attached to it. I kind of touched on some of the real fringe Looney Tune groups. I probably wouldn't associate with those guys too much. I don't know how to put it without like putting a name on the group, like what some of the groups we have in Idaho. I don't want to target these groups specifically, but I just disagree with their method of having their freedoms exchanged.
I think the best way to say it is just to do your research and learn kind of what these groups stand for, look what they've done, look where their stance is on things, and that'll kind of help you out, help you decide what you need to do,
Yeah.
So just something to think about.
Yeah, just be involved and really pay attention. Like look what's going on in Virginia that we talked about. Pay attention to this case at the Supreme Court, because these influence our rights, like right now. I mean, this is history happening right now in the making. So understand what's going on. So when you do have that conversation at Christmas dinner with Uncle Bill, who's not so much gun friendly, that you can actually invoke some kind of thought process in the conversation and have real dialogue and not an argument.
Yeah. And maybe you can make him understand your position a little bit more, Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. So that's what's going on in the gun world right now. I think that covers it pretty well.
Yeah. That was kind of a huge swath of drinking from a fire hose. Some of this stuff I'm not very good at articulating. There's just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, and we're not legal experts. We need to say that first and foremost, but,
believe it or not, neither of us are attorneys.
No, maybe we should be, but, that's kind of, where we leave you to kind of do your own research and, to kind of just do, look around. There's, we find this stuff on the internet and,
please don't take our word for it ever. Like if something comes in question, or if you think we're just full of crap or talking in hyperbole, do your homework. Just look it up and realize that, man, some of this information is truly legit. And I know I'll get some of my stuff wrong, and I'm not scared to admit that I'm wrong a lot of the time, but
and nobody's perfect.
Arm yourself with facts.
If we can find this, you can find this. And it's just as easy to find for you, and you should be able to do your research and read just like we have. So, but if you have
a lot of you probably read better than I do.
Yeah, could be. I'm surprised you know how to read sometimes.
Well,
So, but if you want to know more about any of this or have any questions, just send us an email, podcast@iishooting.com, or Facebook and Instagram @range-minded-podcast. You'll be able to find us there, and we'll try to point you in the right direction. So,
heck yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Yeah, get out and shoot.
Yeah, go shoot. Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.